Welcome to this Python automation tutorial. Today I'll be teaching you some powerful automations that can save you time and streamline your workflows. And to make it even easier, I've put together a free mini workbook filled with all the examples you can see on screen down below. I do also recommend checking out all my other courses which you can see on screen now. But without any more said, let's get into the video. So let's start here. What even is automation anyway? Well, automation is the process of getting a computer to run a task for you that would normally take you time. It's best used when it's a repetitive task that you're doing day in and out and requires a lot of manual intervention. Python is an excellent language for this. Now, what you will want to do is type, and in a cell here, !pip, so pip, and then followed by install, and all the libraries we'll be using today. So we're going to pip install requests, pandas, open pyxl, schedule, and seaborn. And as a little side note, OS will be used heavily here, especially when we're manipulating files or saving them. However, it is standard in Python when you install it, so we don't need to explicitly bring it in. Now, OS again handles files and directories, pandas, data manipulation. Seaborn is more of a visualization library. However, because it does come with some built-in datasets that allows us to use it in tandem with pandas to work with data. And finally, schedule. That's a really cool one. It means you can press a button in the morning and get your job done in the afternoon, or even the next day. Let's go straight into section 2, working with files and folders. Our goal here is to automate file handling, such as renaming, moving, or organizing files. Once we've imported OS, what we want to do is write a script that can rename files. That's a very easy task, but imagine if you had 50 files. Well, it gets a little bit more complex. So what we want to do here is create a variable called directory, and within that, store the folder path. We will start it with an R. The reason for that, and you can see I do explain it in these comments, is because it means it's a raw path, allowing the file path to hold special characters. So let's get straight into it. What we're going to do is I'm going to open up my folder over here, which I've saved on my desktop. I'm going to delete those temporary words there, and we're going to copy the folder path. The easiest way to do that is first, well, we need a folder, so I'll call one automation. But if you head all the way to the top, you see where it says Python automation, you just click that, copy, and then paste. Now, what I will want to do is create something to rename, so you can see I'm doing that on screen. And now that we've copied this folder path, again, you could also right-click and copy, but we'll just stick with Control-C for now, and pasted it into this raw string. It's now saved under the variable directory. Fantastic. Following this, we're going to want to do a for loop through each of the files in that directory. Now, all that means is we're just going to get a list of the files and look through them. To do that, we're going to use the OS. We're going to use a specific method called list directory or list dir, and specifically throw in that variable of directory. Then we're going to create a new variable within that called new name, and we're going to assign that to the string of tdd underscore plus file name. This is going to create a new name for each file by adding tdd underscore to the very beginning. Once we've done that, we're able to actually rename it. You can see I explain it in a little bit more detail with these comments. I did os.rename. I took that file name and I renamed it to the new name. And it's as simple as that. So let's run this cell, and to do that, all you do is hold Shift and Enter. You can see on my screen now that it's renamed the files. They both have TDD at the very start. We can zoom in a little bit here as well. Brilliant. Again, very simple, but imagine if you had 500 of them to work through, and you had to name them specific things. For example, imagine you had to name them based on the date. You can see when I run it again, it'll just add another additional TDD. That's exactly what we're going to get into in this very next task. we are going to get the date and add that to the beginning. You can see here that if I just wanted to add in the date, well, that's a manual step. The problem here is I'd have to go in each and every single day and type in today's date. I'd rather just hit run and it worked that out for me, and I don't have to change the script ever. So this is how we do it. First of all, we want to import the datetime module to work with, well, dates and time. And once we've done that, we can then again assign our directory as part of that raw string, the very same thing we did up here. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. Of course, your folder path will likely be different. Then we want to get today's date, because every time I run it, I want it to repull the date. So we create a variable called today_date, and we use the .today method. And more specifically, we want it in year, month, day format, which is why we have this bit at the end here. So once we have the date and we have the directory, what we're able to do is then loop through in a for loop each of those files, getting a list of every single one listed. What we'll do here is we'll actually take it a step further and we'll separate the file and the extension. So we'll do name, extension, or ext, is equal to splitting the file name. This means there's two different parts to it, the name and the extension. What we'll want to do from this is create a new name with file underscore at the beginning, also known as the prefix, and the today's date as the suffix right at the end. So inside this f string, because we are calling variables in the curly brackets, we'll have file underscore name underscore today's date, and then the extension, which are the three core parts of the name. Now we can go ahead and just rename it. See, again, we've called it new name. So we go ahead and os.rename the file name to new name. And again, we took it a little bit further with a print here, so that when we run it, it means it will tell you in an output that it's been done. And you can see I ran it, and how quickly was that? Look at that. I mean, immediately we have file, the two TDDs, but then the date at the end, which is fantastic. That's just saved us a whole lot of time. Now, moving on, I'm going to head back and just quickly go into the very next example. Because look, we've looked at folders, we've changed their names, we've added the date. But what if I wanted to delete a folder? Let's say I had an import from some sort of CRM system or otherwise, and some of the folders or files I didn't really need. Well, I could go through and manually hunt those out and delete them, or I could look in the file directory. Now here, where it's a little bit different, is instead of just pasting in the directory, I want to look for a very specific file. So if I right click on it, go all the way down to copy path, so right click, and then here copy as path, we can then paste that in, meaning it doesn't just see the whole directory, but only that very specific folder that we want it to look at. And again, make sure you only have a single set of quotation marks around this. From here, we want to check if the file even exists, and if it does, well, then we'll delete it. So if os.path exists, then remove it and print in an F string, the file has been removed. Else, well, let the user know that it doesn't exist. So let's hit run on this, and you can see actually I get an error. Now, the reason for this is because I don't have the required permissions to be able to run this. I don't have administrator rights, which is strange because it's my own personal laptop. Although I've done a little bit of research, and it says that if I do install the file or download it as a .py, I will then be able to right click and run as administrator. So moving on to data automation with pandas. Pandas is a data manipulation library for working with different tables and arrays. What we're going to do first of all is import pandas and assign it the alias PD, which is just convention. Seaborn as SNS, bring back in that OS, and again date time as well. Then we want to load in that Seaborn dataset called tips. And if I give a quick example here, let's do that very quickly. Let's run all of this. it's going to load in the tips dataset under the variable tips. And let's take a quick look at it just to ensure we do understand it. So if I type tips.head, and again, this is more aligned with my data analytics courses, but we can now look at the first 5 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, indexing starts at 0. This is data about tips and how much someone tipped at a restaurant based on their sex, if they were a smoker, the time of the day, and the size of the party going to the restaurant. Now, I could even look at some basic statistics here with tips.describe. I can see, the count of total bill, the average total bill, tip, and party size. I could again filter it just to look at people who went down for lunch. I could even do all of this, automate it, and then save it as a file with today's date in a directory. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's again copy this directory, head back in, and then paste it here. Again, Shift Enter. And what you'll see is, very quickly, we will have a new CSV file here. One with those stats we looked at earlier. Very familiar with this view because we've just seen it. And then for the lunch tips as well, you can see it's named them both with today's date. Here we go. And if we do filter this time column, it should all be lunch, which it is. So fantastic. Now, how did we do that? Well, we loaded the data set, tips from SNS or Seaborn, stored it under tips. We then ran a description or a .describe method. We filtered it for lunch. This is, we will teach this in the pandas tutorial. And then we did that same thing to get today's date. And very simply, all we did is got an output directory and said, look, if it doesn't exist already, then save it there. Stats and lunch tips, ensuring that we do finish it with today's date as a CSV file. Now, finally, scheduling tasks. This is really cool. This is what you can use to automate a task on a schedule. This script runs a function, which we're defining here, called job, to run every day at a specific time. So the function we're defining here, called job, is simply to print task is running. Now, let me show you what that is. If we go to that was not what I wanted. If we go to a new cell here, and we make a function called job, and then we call job here, it will just print task is running, which is great. But what if I could import schedule and time to schedule.everyday at 4:58? Now that means when I run it with Shift and Enter, nothing will happen. At least not now, because it's past that time, so it won't run. But if it did hit that time, immediately it would go through. Now, just to keep the script running to check the schedule, what we're doing is every seconds, we're just checking it's still running. Now, as a little exercise, what we do if we have a few throughout, but we have a bonus challenge combining all these techniques. Are you able to create a script that combines multiple techniques? i.e., it reads data from a file, processes it, and saves a summary report at a scheduled time. A hint here as well. Now, if you did enjoy this or do want a more in-depth tutorial, or maybe a fully flushed out workbook and video created, then please do let me know. All the best.